Edwin Frondozo on the Business Leadership Podcast every week for a unique program featuring insights and actionable items from the world's most successful business leaders. Hear firsthand the exclusive interviews and personal journeys on how today's transformational leaders made it to the top.
Hey everybody, it's Edwin, and welcome to the Business Leadership Podcast. I'm back from Slovakia, and I'm excited to share this episode number 42 with Peter Reitano, the CEO and co-founder at Abacus Agency. In the conversation, we discuss his experience working on a number of agencies worldwide, from UK to Australia and now in Toronto. We talk about the challenges growing and scaling a company and what he learned during a company acquisition. Before jumping in, quick shout out to my media partners, IT World Canada and Startup Canada, for the overwhelming support of the podcast. Now enjoy the show. Welcome to the Business Leadership Podcast.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on the show.
So let's just jump in. Why don't we get started off with your current company now, company you're leading, Abacus. Tell us a bit more about your role. I know we had Jeff on the podcast earlier on, so maybe tell us the difference between you and him, and what are you guys trying to accomplish over the next 12 months?
Sure. So Jeff and I co-founded Abacus probably a year and a half ago around, and when we got together, the central thrust of Abacus was Jeff was just coming off the back of 20 years in startups on the brand side of marketing. I was coming off the back of 10 years in agency side marketing. So I had another agency before this. And my agency was a full service digital agency. We looked around and saw all the other agencies talking about being full service digital agencies. We saw a lot of disruption in the marketing world, a lot of technology and data. And we wanted to create an agency that was an agency or a company of the future. So we looked at, or we hypothesized what we saw as, what would an agency look like in 2020, and reverse engineered that. Mm-hmm. And a few things that inform that. So a move from generalist to specialist. So everybody says they can do everything for everybody, but that means you're not good at, anything particularly. Right. So we really wanted to go deep in one area, and that area was Facebook. There's a ton of growth in Facebook, 2 billion people on the platform. They own 4 out of the 5 most used apps: Facebook Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp. But there's a lot of misunderstanding or lack of understanding in the advertising world on how to get the best out of Facebook. Mm-hmm, so we wanted to come in there and provide that service to brands. More and more data in the marketing world. So we wanted to introduce our kind of lean startup focused marketing to bigger brands, which means kind of that zero waste marketing. We take a real acquisition, conversion focused approach to our marketing. So most of the campaigns we run have some kind of digital conversion, whether that's a bank trying to get more credit card customers or an e-commerce store trying to get more clients. And then we also wanted to create a company that was a good place to work. Me and Jeff are both not really the micromanagey type of people. So we wanted to create a company that was fun for people to work in, but also attracted the top tier talent. So we had to set up the culture in a little bit different way.
Yeah, no, and I know when I had Jeff on, it was really interesting. We dove deep into culture and what both of the two of you were thinking about, what was the job, what company would I want to work for, mm-hmm. and how do we build that? But we'll try to get back into that as well, because you're two different individuals. But when I was looking and I was doing some research, and Peter, looking at over your career, I mean, you literally work worldwide, so you have this different view of the world, and I'd love for you, if you can, to share some of the key turning points that you encountered, maybe some problems, some challenges that made you make a decision that eventually allowed you to grow as the business leader you are today.
Mm-hmm. I think the big turning point for me as somebody getting into entrepreneurship was, so just some background. I worked in an agency in the UK that did similar kind of things to my last agency, but they also had this really cool product that did HR management. So it was an app that did an enterprise HR management, and it did really well in Europe, but nobody knew about it outside of Europe. Mm-hmm. So I suggested to them, why don't I take this app and take it out to Australia and Asia and see if I can set them up out in there. And my family are Australian, so I could go and stay with them.
That
So it
helps.
was somewhat low risk
Yes.
for me. I just wanted to go and spend some time in the sunshine, but also, try and do something business related while I was out there. And it did really well. And that was my first taste of, because I did it purely on 100% commission. So if I didn't do anything, it was work and no pay, but there was upside for me. And I basically set up referral partners, did all the business development, did all the brand building out there, did all the digital marketing. It was my first taste of like hacking together a business, because it felt like my business out there. And I did that for 2 years, and, it worked really well. And I think also it was a big development for me in terms of, I was fairly comfortable in England, good job. And then that put me somewhere that was somewhat uncomfortable and didn't know anybody. And I had to just, get to work and do it. So
Wow.
the character growth from doing that, I think, was the big benefit that I didn't really realize at the time. But looking back, it certainly made me grow. But it was like, in terms of business, that's where I really cut my teeth.
I mean, that's a pretty big, that's really significant in terms of where you were probably in your life at that time, low risk for the company, high value for you. Can you share with us in terms of 2 years there, you started from nothing, and how did you grow that business there? And did you actually grow a team there as well?
So the way I grew it was building out channel partner relationships. So I did some digital marketing. I kind of was like, what's this SEO thing? Let me try some of this. Let me do some PPC. Wasted lots of money learning how to do it. But the big thing I did was research the types of people that could be the end-to-end brand and tried to sell them. This cold calling, just reaching out to people and looking for people that potentially could resell. So other agencies that maybe wanted another revenue stream, and getting them on as channel partners. And then through that, those guys did a lot of the selling for me. So it was that system of selling is something I used to grow my last agency. That's where I learned the power of building up, the compounding power of building up referral relationships.
That's great. That's awesome. And is that organization, I'm sure you're probably still in touch, are they still have those channel partners in place? And
yeah, I'm sure they do. I mean, I haven't talked to them in a while. We actually used their HR management software at my last agency, but it's, as far as I know, they're like 4,000, 5,000 clients. They're rocking and rolling. I think that software does way more revenue than the agency does. Like,
wow.
it's turned into a real cash cow for them.
That's amazing. And I guess because you guys are so specialized in Abacus, and looking back at that experience, perhaps in the future, are you, Jeff, looking for a type of product as well to sell to different agencies? Is that even in the horizon?
So we're not looking to be a SaaS type company. What we are doing is building out our own tech to get more efficiencies internally, and we're building out some machine learning tech that is going to allow us to extrapolate more insights from the campaigns that we're running and kind of cross pollinate different campaigns. So the way we built Abacus was, service first for the first year. Look at the marketplace, look at where we see deficiencies with tech, try other tools, see where they fail, and then start building out the technology for our agency. So we actually built up profitability and cash flow and the business, and then we started investing in tech, rather than the kind of typical tech model, which is run a deficit, build out some tech, hope you find customers. See, we've got customers now, we've got a team, and now we're kind of deploying tech within the company.
And that's great. And it's pretty smart. I mean, in terms of, it's almost the best of both worlds. I mean, both you and Jeff come from this entrepreneurial background. Jeff was really in depth in startups. So you guys really learned a lot, being out there before starting Abacus. And do you guys ever reflect on that? Like, oh, this is great. We actually started this perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff has been an awesome business partner. He is super experienced in the startup world. He's a very technical marketer, but he's just generally great at growth. Like, that's his bread and butter, growth marketing. So we work really well together. I'm a business operator. I know how to grow businesses, especially agencies. But I'm more of a run a company lean, profitable, good business, and scale it up slowly. Jeff is, let's grow this thing as fast as possible. We're on a rocket ship, like the classic tech kind of growth. So we meet somewhere in the middle. It's a nice friction. He wants to grow 1,000,000 miles an hour. I want to grow at 100. We meet at 10,000.
I want to talk about your last agency. You brought it up a couple of times, and it was grown. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was acquired. It got acquired, and you were one of the key persons in the company at the time. So just looking at that from a business leadership perspective, what were the challenges, coming into this acquisition? You were leading a team and a company, and that was being acquired.
Lots of challenges with an acquisition, especially a service-based acquisition. It's a bit different. I'd say the biggest learning from that to do a successful acquisition is make sure you manage cultural changes really well.
Okay.
Looking back, I don't think that was handled as good as it could have been. And I think the way we ran our agency was very different to how the acquiring company ran their agency. And so there was a mismatch there. And that caused, quite a lot of friction with the staff during the changeover. So in hindsight, I mean, it should be obvious, but make sure that you handle the cultural intricacies very, very carefully.
Like, how would you do that? I mean, looking back, like, how would you handle that differently? If you were to do that whole acquisition again, or this partnership again, what do you think you would do?
I would keep running the companies as separate entities for maybe a year or two.
Okay.
Yeah. And have them start cross-pollinating and working together, but keep them as at least two separate locations where they can kind of run as different cultures, and then start intermixing them.
Like a courting time.
Right. Exactly. Like getting used to it, breathing
you
time.
have to date first.
Yeah. I mean, an acquisition is stressful for everybody as well. Like before, I remember before I worked at the agency in England, I worked at one company that went out of business, and then I worked at a hosting company that was bought for £8 million. And basically it was, we've sold the company, collected the staff in a room, we sold the company. You can, you could carry on working with the new acquirer, but you have to move 4 hours down south.
Oh my.
Up to you guys. So I've been in that situation, and even the mention of change sends ripples through your company, right? So even just the idea of an acquisition coming in and change, there's a lot of stress in there, and so you've got to just handle it with kid gloves. I heard a stat that something like 80% of mergers and acquisitions reduces the value of the company.
Wow.
So huge problems when
which company though?
The company being acquired.
Yeah.
So it's kind of not worth it in the end for a lot of the time. So you've just got to be super careful with how you do it.
Wow.
But I'd say the cultural thing, especially for a service business that's so dependent on its talent, is key.
Okay. But I know from I spoken to many executives who've gone through the acquisition, either being acquired or being the ones who's acquiring. Usually there's a match within the business on the top level.
Right.
And was that the same case here?
Yeah.
Or was it like a competition taking you out? Like, what happened?
No. I mean, there was a strategy, basically. The agency, they wanted to, they had a lot of clients, but they were all smaller clients. We had a lot of big clients.
Okay.
And they were also, and they were building out a brand for very small, clients as well. So we were going to be the premium offering. They had the kind of middle ground offering targeting, lawyers and dentists or whatever. And then they were going to do a very small offering. So
they're the full agency, the one that,
exactly.
The one your guys are getting away
exactly,
from.
Yeah. So the plan was there, and I think it makes sense. But just in hindsight, if I was to execute it again, it would be slightly different.
So throughout we talked about 3 different organizations. One's from the UK. You expanded operations. You had another agency that got acquired. So these are specific different roles. You changed, and your team probably changed. So responsibilities changed. So how did you adjust and continually grow to be an effective leader that who you are today?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's making lots of mistakes and continually being open to review those mistakes that you're making, and then improving on how you manage and lead people.
Right.
I wasn't an MBA. Jeff was an MBA. So I didn't really go through, management school or anything like that. So most of my entrepreneurial life has been, learned by doing.
Just jumping in.
Yeah. So, continually kind of reading and learning and, looking online and talking to other people that are, running companies. I run a group called Bellwether, which is a, entrepreneurs, kind of, I'd say networking group, at Soho House. And it's, tech companies, VCs, media people, all of, some similar leadership type roles, and just get together and talk about this stuff and do therapy and exchange ideas.
For
and
sure.
It's great having friends doing similar things. You can say, okay, what's working for you, and they can tell you what's worked and what's not worked, and you can do the same for them. So collaborative in the scene.
And that's great, and I hear that a lot in terms of the leaders, entrepreneurs, always reflecting. But when did you really start actively doing that for yourself? Like when was that moment when you're like, you know what, I need to start working on, maybe I don't know everything.
Yeah. I think, it's a good point, because when you're younger, you're like, I obviously know everything.
Exactly.
I would say middle of the last agency, I was like, okay, so I've got to start, upping my game. The way I met this guy in Barbados once who was doing this. He's an English guy. He runs this big company out there, and he always said that, he'll, on a leadership journey and in his company, he'll always try and bring everybody with him on this journey, and everybody he'll try and move to the next level. As the company, you can feel when a company is getting promoted into the next league, and you start getting different types of clients. But he was always like, I want to bring everybody with me on the bus ride, and I'll do everything I can to train them up and give them all the resources. But sometimes they can't come with you. And sometimes they're, whatever, they're not putting their effort in or whatever it is. And that's where you kind of have to part ways. And I always thought it's a good attitude. You definitely want to be supportive. But I always thought, the leader shouldn't be exempt from that as well. So I always try and put myself on that bus. And I was like, okay, so I'm expecting everybody else to upskill and learn and constantly evolve. And I need to do that myself as well. I can't have my seat be safe on the bus. Otherwise I'll just get lazy.
Wow,
so continually kind of trying to improve on myself, so I'm a better leader for everybody.
I know we talked about, in terms of the theory or the hypothesis of leading advocates. And I know I want to just dig a bit deeper from your point of view. What was now the approach that you guys are now taking to grow and scale? I mean, you're about a year and a half in, you're 2 years in. Is it still the same? What's changed since then? Because you guys are lean startup.
Mm-hmm.
So
we've gone from Jeff and I to 13 people. Mm-hmm. We've had some remote work. We've still got some remote work. So it's mainly localized in Toronto, but with some distributed teams as well. Really, the central hypothesis has stayed the same. We were coming into an industry where the incumbents treated employees in a certain way. Anybody that's worked in the agency world knows that margins are being squeezed. There's a lot of kind of disruption in tech. Agencies in the golden era, they used to be like charging huge commissions, and then they get squeezed, and then they have these different pricing models with full-time employees. And with that came down, and then there's lots of acquisitions from holding companies. And with that came a very profit-centered accounting approach to agencies, the way they ran. So it became less about, say, creativity and more about like, how do we run this as like a very profitable or just a barely profitable enterprise. And with that came a lot of pressure on staff. So typical in agency world is being overworked, micromanagement, not a lot of respect, and huge turnover. So speaking with a local, very large agency recently, and his president told me that it's a good year if they only lose 25% of their staff.
Wow.
And that's normal in the agency world. So a quarter of your staff turning over every year. So we knew there had to be a better way to do this. I mean, just from a cost perspective, that's insane to be hiring and training. And, in a somewhat service business, mainly service business, the employees are that's your IP. So we wanted to set up an agency that would attract people and retain them and nurture them so they can perform at the top of their game. So a big part of that is treating them with a lot of respect. So we hire the best people, and we leave them alone in their role, and we let them do their thing, and we treat them like humans. So if somebody wants to, so with that comes a lot of autonomy, a lot of flexibility. We give people way over standard vacation days.
Unlimited?
Not unlimited, yeah.
No one's listening to us now.
Yeah. Maybe one day. I've heard that with unlimited, you have the opposite effect. That's what I've read quite often, is people are so scared to take vacations.
They take none.
Yeah, exactly. So We do a minimum 20 days,
That's
just
great.
right off the bat, because as soon as they start. And so with flexibility, you know, if somebody wants to go and work from their cottage on a Friday, cool, do it, as long as we hit our goals. So we don't want to be just the company where the CEO jets off and does his thing for the long weekend or whatever. So treating everybody like that. If you need to drop your kids off, some football practice and leave at 3:00, cool, have at it. We just care about results and performance, not about bums in seats.
No, and I love your office. Both you and Jeff are sitting with the team. Right? You guys are, and it's just everyone's equal here, it seems.
Yeah, we just wanted to run a really, really flat organization where everybody essentially is just doing their thing and getting on with work, and we've all got access to each other. I'm sure I know over time that's going to change. Not,
Sure.
to start with, everybody's involved in every conversation. Then fewer people are involved in the management conversations, and that gets distributed out. But we want to try and keep it as flat as possible as we grow.
Peter, before we press record, actually, we had a quick discussion in terms of mentors, and you listed Mitch Joel, and funny enough, your current business partner, Jeff Goldenberg, who are your key mentors in your life. So I'm really interested for both of them. Why would you say that?
So Mitch, I've looked up to him as an agency leader for quite a while. He ran an agency called Twist Image. He's run a podcast called 6 Pixels of Separation,
Right.
which is a great podcast.
Yeah.
His agency was acquired by WPP a few years ago. And basically in the agency game, there is no better acquisition than one of the holding companies, WPP, Publicis, Omnicom, or now a lot of the consulting shops like Deloitte, Accenture.
Sure.
So he's given me a lot of advice on that particular thing, like how do you set your agency or business up for long-term growth and acquisition. One of the things he told me was they were never set right early on, like we were going to build this and sell it. But what they did do is build the agency so that it was sellable. Right. So
like
right off the get-go, it was built so it would be a proposition that WPP would like, regardless of whether they would sell it or not, because it means your business is healthy and lean and ran well. Like there's certain things a WPP looks for in an acquisition. So they ran the agency like that. So I just think he's at the forefront of a lot of the kind of digital conversations. He's ran a great agency. He's still a thought leader. I just think he's a really personable guy, and he also likes death metal music. So
there it is.
So I'm in a group on Facebook with him where we share kind of metal tracks and stuff. So we bond over that. So
That's cool.
Yeah, from an agency world, I think there's no better guy to look up to. And then Jeff, he's just a very experienced business guy. And I work very closely with him, and I learn a lot from him. So, he's 10 years older than me, been in business for longer. He's got a lot of scars and funny stories. He's raised money from the mob, and he's done all this weird funny things in Vegas. And he's run a poker business and a food business, and he's done all of this stuff. And it's just, he's just honestly a fountain of knowledge. Like we've got different approaches to things. I think we both learn off each other.
I didn't ask the right questions to Jeff when he was on here. It seems like.
But he, even with the little examples, like, we both do a lot of public speaking.
Yes.
And, I'll do a talk, and I over prepare. I'm type A. I'm preparing for a month before, learn my speech, do my thing, get up there. Jeff is like day before, musing on something, wings it. And there's just no way I could do that. A, from like, a social perspective, but B, just, he just has all of this knowledge deep within him that he can just riff for hours on business stuff. So I think that's why he's such a great mentor at the various startup institutions as well, as he can just, I've never met somebody who you can sit down with, tell a business idea, and he can shoot that many holes in it that quickly.
So I love to ask this question on the podcast. It's a little fun, but sometimes it gets my guests thinking. So if I were to ask, if I was to ask Jeff now, or any of your past partners, your team members, your colleagues, what's the best business leadership quality that you possess? What do you think they would say?
I think Jeff would say something like managing the money.
Yeah, that's not bad.
That's definitely where He doesn't have as much interest on kind of day-to-day ops and money management and that kind of stuff. So I would say that's the biggest gap I would fill for Jeff. I don't know what else he would say about me. This is an excellent question. My last business partner would definitely say something. In that relationship, he was an accountant, so he did a lot of the financing stuff, and I was the strategy guy, agency guy. He really didn't love the agency world and marketing and stuff. So it was me kind of doing a lot of the thought leadership and that type of stuff. So I think
it flipped sides, it seems like.
It really did. Yeah, it really did. So, I mean, I think I like that. It's basically you look at somebody and you're like, okay, so, where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? You should double down on that and I'll double down on this. So, playing up to your strengths and playing down and trying not to spend too much time on your weaknesses.
So what else, Peter? Do you have some special projects, initiatives, or something fun that you're looking forward towards?
With Abacus, it's really, we're, like I said, we're building out our tech, and in 2018, we're just going to come bolting out the gates right away. So we're looking to minimum double the size of the company next year. So it's going to be a big year of sales and growth and building out our tech, and we're hiring new people. So lots of exciting stuff there. Couple of other things I'm working on right now. So we're just invested in a new company in the cannabis space. So I'm super excited about that space. On kind of a content play, e-commerce play. Jeff and I have talked about doing a lot of helping cannabis companies, because it's obviously a booming industry. Jeff is particularly fond of cannabis,
and it's opening wide for the listeners out there in Canada. They just, I mean, you probably could talk more, but the regulations is opening up and it's legal.
Yeah.
And
so we're getting full, legalization next year. So we've got medical already. Now we're moving into recreational. So right now is a kind of super interesting zone where we've got consumer side brands starting up, gaining traction already, even though it's not quite legal, but they're getting ready for that. And there's really interesting marketing questions to be answered. Like, how do you market something that's illegal right now, but is going to be illegal? Like, you can't do it on Facebook. You can't do it across Google. You can't do it on most programmatic exchanges. So you have to do kind of SEO, content focused type marketing. So, me and Jeff are dabbling in that, and I've just invested in a company called Weedbox as well. So super excited about that.
Very cool. Very cool. We'll look out for that. I mean, we'll post it on the episode, webpage as well. Mm-hmm. But Peter, I'm having a blast. I think we're vibing on this. We could probably talk a lot. And I mean, even my own interest in terms of the marijuana space, we probably could go all night and all day if it was the evening when we're recording this. But I'd love to get some of your final thoughts around business leadership, some observations, and ideally, I'd love to get actionable recommendations for the listeners out there who might be looking to grow a business, start a business, take that leap to build a business overseas, or even starting an agency. Any tips?
One thing I would say that a lot of people I talk to who are thinking about starting a business but are scared, I get a lot of anxiety around the risk factor. Or I don't get a lot but I get a lot of feedback on that. A lot of people say, it's risky to start a business, and there's a perception that having a salaried position is more stable, less risk. But I actually think having control over your destiny in the long run is the less risky thing to do. And having somebody else control that, being fireable at 45, 50 at the top of your game, and then being thrown away and looking for a job is brutal. So I think everybody should think about not necessarily having it as their own income stream, but diversifying and having multiple income streams where they're essentially de-risking. You'd never want to just rely on one thing as your income stream. But also think about business in a way where, you don't have to be like, I'm just going to quit my nice paying, fat paying job at the bank and then start this tech company that may not be profitable for 3 years. You can start doing things on the weekend,
right,
in the evening, building things up. You don't have to do all in on one and nothing on the other. You can do a little bit of kind of side hustle type stuff. So I think that takes a lot of the risk out of it. Like, I have Abacus, but I also have an e-commerce store that I run that is like nootropics and health supplements. I do some investing, I do some teaching, but I like the idea of building up revenue streams. And if you're going to start a business, start testing and building stuff out on the side before you go all into it.
To close, Peter, let us know where we could find more information about you, Abacus, any of these amazing projects here, or even some of this concerts that you might be going with that you want to share.
So you can find Abacus at abacus.agency. And on the website, you'll find all of our social profiles and stuff. If you want to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn with Peter Reitano. My Twitter handle is Digidharma, DIGIDHARMA. So any of those places, happy to connect. My other sites, so there's weedbox.io, there's bellwethertoronto.com, and that's the networking group. And then there's the harringtonmethod.com, which is the e-commerce store for nootropics.
Oh, great. So don't worry about writing notes. We're definitely going to post that on the website for Peter. But again, awesome time. Thank you for joining us on the Business Leadership Podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's it, folks. Thank you for listening to the Business Leadership Podcast, episode 42 with Peter Reitano. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and realize that perhaps you need to start thinking about multiple revenue streams. To learn more about Peter, Abacus Agency, and all the other companies that he's involved with, please head over to thebusinessleadership.com/042. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please reach out to me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, or directly via email to edwin@thebusinessleadership.com. Thank you again to everyone who has reached out, leaving me a comment on social media. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you are gaining as much insight as I am. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. I am grateful for your time. Edwin signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Business Leadership Podcast at thebusinessleadership.com.